Peterborough, Kawartha.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday during a press conference, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "Some people will say we moved too quickly. Other people will say, no, we should have acted weeks ago. The reality is this. The Emergencies Act is not something to take lightly. It is not the first thing you turn to, nor the second, nor the third. So my question is, Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister please tell Canadians what first, second, and third actions he took before invoking the emergency?"
The Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
You know, right from the outset of the blockades and the disruptions that were taking place in Ottawa, and then the blockades at our critical infrastructure at our ports of entry, our government has worked with municipal and provincial partners right across the country in order to ensure that they had the resources and the support they needed to keep Canadians safe.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask the Minister to repeat. I'm right next to you, or to the Honourable Member, and I can't hear it because of the shouting. If I can ask the Honourable Minister to start from the top so that at least I can hear it, and hopefully the Honourable Member for Peterborough Kawartha can hear the answer.
First, Mr. Speaker, I'm actually very glad to see that the Conservatives have once again changed their position on something important. Whereas first they supported these blockades, and now that they recognize that this is a largely foreign-funded, targeted, and coordinating attack on Canadian critical infrastructure, they flip-flop. Good for them. We're all getting used to it.
The member for Peterborough Kawartha.
Mr. Speaker, I think the person or the party that has flip-flopped is the Liberals. Last week, you said you had all the tools they needed to do this. And now we have an Emergency Measures Act.
Yeah.
We were told we would never need federal vaccine mandates. That changed. Now you're saying it's just jurisdiction. How can we trust this government? How much authority does the Prime Minister need to set an unprecedented Emergency Measures Act? How much authority does he need?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the evidence is clear. A largely foreign-funded, targeted, and coordinating attack on critical Canadian infrastructure at our borders is hurting Canada and harming Canadians. And, Mr. Speaker, it was equally clear that we needed to do more and would have to do what was required. Mr. Speaker, we've introduced measures that will create greater financial scrutiny and financial consequences for the people who are engaged in this criminal behavior. The evidence of firearms at Coots elevates the risk to Canadian security and safety, and we will do what is required to keep Canadians safe.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, last Friday, the Prime Minister said that the Ottawa Police had enough resources to deal with the protesters.
That's right.
And on Monday, he calls for emergency measures. Boy, that escalated quickly. He had 17 days to act, and after hiding at his cottage on his MacBook for the first week, he did nothing but divide and stigmatize. Mr. Speaker, the constituents in Saskatoon West want to know what changed in the Prime Minister's mind over the weekend to justify such drastic measures.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I want to assure my colleague that the RCMP has been supporting and aiding the Ottawa Police Service to enforce public safety, not only here in Ottawa, but in Windsor, where we've reopened the Ambassador Bridge, in Coots, where the border's reopened, in Surrey, where the border's reopened, and that's good. It's good for the economy. It's good for Canadians who can get back to work, Mr. Speaker. And yesterday's invocation of the Emergencies Act is meant to secure those gains so that we give the police all of the tools that they need, whether it's declaring certain zones which are adjacent to our borders, to our national symbols, Mr. Speaker. It's important for the Conservatives to ask those participating in the illegal blockades to now go home.
The Honourable Member for Niagara Falls.
Mr. Speaker, for too long, Conservatives have been calling on this government to remove the mandatory PCR test requirements for those entering Canada. In my riding of Niagara Falls, this policy has had a devastating impact on our economy. Visits from the U.S. are nowhere near the record levels reached in 2019, and these expensive costs put on our visitors and Canadians traveling prevent them from visiting their families and loved ones. My residents want to know this: when will all federal travel mandates be ended?
The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Speaker, I want to thank my honourable colleague for giving me the opportunity to share with him and all members of this House and all Canadians the great announcement that myself and our colleagues made today. Today, based on the science and the public health advice we received, we eased our travel measure, including, Mr. Speaker, allowing incoming travellers to use an antigen test instead of the PCR test, pre-departure test. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Windsor.